Now it's time for Andreas Grabner's talk on scaling event-driven delivery using Keptn.
Hello, continuous delivery crowd. Welcome to my home or my kitchen. That's where I do most of my presentations and my work these days. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about event-driven continuous delivery and how we can scale it with Keptn. My name is Andy Grabner, and let's switch right into presentation mode here. What I'm going to show you today is a lot about Keptn. You can see here I have a Keptn version installed, in my case on EKS. I have a 3-stage delivery pipeline set up that I will use throughout my presentation to give you some live demos. And what I actually want to do, I want to kick off a deployment. As you can see here, currently build number 2 of one of my microservices is deployed. It's not that fancy, my microservice. It's a Node.js based application. Build number 2 has been deployed. And actually in staging, as you can see, it didn't make it into production because in staging we had a quality gate failure. That means I can actually see I didn't make all of my points. This is why Keptn actually didn't promote build number 2. But let's kick off build number 3. I can do it through different means. The way I'm doing it, I'm just using the CLI here. I'm basically just saying Keptn send event new artifact. So Keptn, I have a new artifact for a particular project, for a particular service. And this is now build number 3. And that's what I'm going to kick off. So I'm doing this now. And as I explain to you what Keptn is, how it works, you will understand a little bit more what is happening behind the scenes. But let's switch over to slides first. Got a couple of slides for you. So as I said, my name is Andreas Grabner. I am working for Dynatrace. And I think my Siri or whatever that just was in the background is also trying to participate. Anyway, I work for Dynatrace. I'm also DevRel for Keptn. If you want to know more about Keptn, here are all, I think, the links that are relevant. So check it out, star us on Gip, join our Slack channel, Slack Keptn SH would be great. We are a CNCF sandbox project right now. We're trying to grow the community because we need your feedback and also your contribution to really make this a success. All right, so let's go in. What is Keptn? Keptn is a data-driven delivery and operations automation platform, or whatever you want to call it. Now, it's hard to say what it is in one sentence because it can do many different things for different people. So depending on who you are, Keptn allows you to pick a use case that you want to automate, whether it's around SLO-based quality gates, progressive delivery, SRE automation, that's all around performance test automation, performance engineering, or auto remediation. So you pick a use case, you then bring your configuration. So for quality gates, you will need your SLI and SLO definitions. For delivery, you need what we call a shipyard file, defining how many stages you have and what should happen in a stage. For SRE automation, you need to specify what workload you want to simulate. And for auto remediation, you can specify your runbooks. Most importantly, Keptn connects and orchestrates the tools that can do the job well on your target platform, whether this is Kubernetes or even non-Kubernetes. You can choose and connect any tool. So what Keptn then really does, Keptn automatically configures all your tools by reaching out to them and then orchestrating the end-to-end workflow that you want to automate and provides it as a self-service so that everyone can easily get access to quality gates, performance test automation, delivery, or auto remediation. And it's doing it through an event-driven architecture. Everything is declarative. You will see this later on, the processes, everything is stored in Git. SLOs are very central. Everything Keptn does after every action, it re-evaluates your SLOs, going out to your monitoring and observability tools, making sure everything is good. And all of this is also based on standards to easily integrate any type of tool. We really want to, make sure that we are not leaving any tool out there. We can integrate in with any tool using cloud events as a standard. All right, before I go into the architecture and then going back to my live demo, just to show you 3 very simple user stories. First one is Sumit from Intuit. He's also very active in the CNCF space. He's a contributor to Argo. And what he has built with his team is a distributed load testing environment for their Intuit Kubernetes platform using Argo, Jenkins, and Gatling to run load against their different clusters. And they're now using Keptn for quality gate evaluation. So they're just using a little piece, a part of Keptn that is doing the SLO-based evaluation. And Keptn helps them now to automatically analyze every single test that they run continuously. Second one is Roman from Triscon. They are a performance service company out of Vienna, Austria. They are doing a lot of performance engineering engagements using different pipelines and different tools, but primarily Neoload for testing and Jenkins and Azure DevOps. And what Keptn allows them to do is Keptn orchestrates now for their organizations they work with performance test execution and performance test analysis, and making it so easy that now everyone can easily just say, I need a performance test, and they don't need to go back to the performance test experts. Last example that I have here is Christian from ERT, a clinical trial company out of Germany. They have moved from traditional stack, they're moving, let's say that way, towards Kubernetes. They have consolidated all of their CI, CD primarily into GitLab, which is great. But now they want to add more things into their delivery pipelines, like test automation, evaluation, promotion between stages. And this is where Keptn comes in, because they saw that while GitLab is great, and they're obviously using this primarily, they need a way to orchestrate the individual pipelines that they have, and they need to get automation in terms of, as I said, deployment, multi-stage promotion, and so on. And this is where Keptn comes in. Keptn orchestrates all of these tools and makes sure that they are deploying fast and across multiple stages. You can read more on this in different webinars that we did. Okay, let's go to the architecture. What made us build Keptn the way we built it? Because we looked at the way delivery is done in many organizations, including ours. We started with our Jenkins pipelines or whatever pipelines you have. And the problem with that is not only are they getting very long and large, and complex, there's also mixed information between processing tool and target platforms. There's no clear separation of concerns between developers, DevOps engineers, and what site reliability engineers want. And this is already a problem, having process and tooling and environment information kind of hard-coded, even though I know with templating, we have a lot of great options. And there's other tools out there that are addressing this issue as well. But still, if you think about this, when you start with delivery in the cloud native environment, you pick what you like. Like in our case, also at Dynatrace, we picked Jenkins in the beginning for our first microservices. Then we had more services being onboarded. They copy pasted what worked, made some slight modifications. And in the end, the more we scaled this out, the more permutations we had. Obviously, the more frameworks we built, the more templates we built. But in the end, it is very complex, and it takes a lot of time to figure out if something breaks, why does it break? Who brought in this piece of code or modification? It simply doesn't scale like this. So that's why we said, okay, how can we fix this problem? So what we thought, well, why not break apart the hard-coded dependency between process and tooling, just as we are breaking out monoliths into smaller components. And so that's why we said, you know what, let's just remove the hard dependency between, on the left side, the process and the tooling. Let's rip them apart. And then let's use eventing to connect the two so that we can have a process orchestrator on the left that is just purely focusing on a process that needs to be automated or orchestrated. And then we have capabilities on the right side, whether you call them tools or let's call them capabilities, that can then do a particular thing along that process. And then we use eventing to stitch it all together, which means if you have somebody on the left orchestrating the process and you are asking that process orchestrator to, let's say, run through a delivery process, and one of these steps is I need to deploy a container, then the event is sent out, hey, I need somebody that can deploy container number 1 in the dev stage with blue-green. And then you may have one or multiple capabilities that can then say, yes, I can do this. I can do blue-green in dev, or maybe, well, I can't because I'm not allowed to do this. But whoever then says, I can do it, can execute that task and then send back to the orchestrator when the stuff is done. And this is really what we've done with Keptn. Again, nothing maybe unique and nothing earth-shattering. It's very logical, right? Separate the process definition from the tool definition and using events to connect them. So from a high-level architecture perspective, you install Keptn. What you really install is the core control plane that is really orchestrating the processes that Keptn can automate. All these use cases I showed you earlier. And you also get, obviously, the event bus that comes with Keptn. Now, in order to use Keptn, one role in your organization, let's call it the SREs, they can define the processes or the application plane. We have two major ways how we define process. One is called shipyard. This is for continuous delivery, where, as you can see here, we have dev, staging, and prod. So you specify how many stages in delivery you have. and what should happen in each stage, what type of testing, what type of SLOs or SLAs, what type of deployment should happen. And then we also support operations automation. This is typically around auto remediation. This is where we allow you also to specify a so-called remediation process definition, where you can say, if a certain problem happens, then execute these actions. So on the one end, you specify what processes do you want to automate along delivery or along operations. And then you have another team that can then say, okay, which tools do you have in your organization? Which tools are you using for version control, for deployment, for testing, for monitoring, for validation, for remediation? So we call this the uniform. This is nothing else than basically subscribing to the Keptn events. It's a little service that you write, like a little interoperability layer, but it's all based on cloud events. And then you can plug in any type of tool. And the beneficiary of this is the developer, because if you have an artifact and you say, Keptn, I have a new artifact, and please orchestrate the delivery process that was defined by the SREs, and then just use the tools that the DevOps team has specified, then this artifact is basically promoted along that process. The nice thing with this separation of concern, you can easily update your processes. You can include new processes without having to think about the tools. There's no hard-coded interaction. And you can also change the tools at any point in time in case you decide, or your organization decides, that you're moving from tool A to tool B, but then you don't need to figure out where is this tool used. You just need to make sure that this tool provides the capability and it is reacting to the events. And we think this is why this scales. It's very simple to set up, and there's no hard-coded integrations or hard-coded integrations built anywhere in some pipeline code that has been copy and pasted around many, many times. All right, so let's look at the demo. Let's actually switch to the demo. Where is here we go. This is my demo that I've showed you earlier, right? I'm now switching to a different screen. This is the screen where I see the individual processes that I've kicked off. As you can see here, I've done quite some demos. Kicked off version number 3 earlier. And on the right side, you can actually see the stream of events. So that means in the beginning, it made a configuration change. Then deployment happened, tests were executed, SLIs were retrieved, quality gates were evaluated. And because everything was fine, it went into the next stage. And then in staging, same thing, configurations were changed, deployments happened, tests are running, now SLIs are retrieved. So let me show you a little bit what's actually happening behind the scenes. So in my case, my Keptn runs a couple of projects. The one that I've shown you is the Keptn 07 project. I want to click on this link. Keptn internally holds a Git repository. And initially, when you are setting up a new Keptn project, you give it the so-called shipyard file if you want to do delivery, right? This is my whole pipeline. This is where I specify, Keptn, I want you to orchestrate or provide orchestration around delivery process with 3 stages, dev, staging, and prod. And you specify what should happen within each stage, what type of deployment strategy, what type of test strategy, approval strategies. That's it. So this is the whole thing you start with. And then what Keptn does, it will automatically for every stage create a branch. So let's go into the staging branch. And in this branch now you can see that you have supporting files. So I'm using JMeter as tests tool. That means you can upload JMeter for the scripts for the whole stage. So these tests would then, for instance, be available for the whole stage for any service. Or if you have individual services, I only have one microservice onboarded. So I'm going into the simple node. Then you have the specific configuration files for that service in that stage. And specific, I mean, in my case, I have my Helm charts in here that I've uploaded. I have my service-specific JMeter tests, so they're on top of what is globally available. I also have my Dynatrace. I'm using Dynatrace for observability, my SLI definitions there. I have my SLO definitions there, and more to SLOs later on. But basically, everything is in Git, and this is just an upstream here. And you can see here, I didn't change anything manually earlier. When I did remember I did my CLI in my demo. Where's my CLI? When I did the Keptn send event new artifact, I basically said deploy version number 3. The first event that Keptn actually sends out is, hey, whoever is handling version control, please make the update to your version control system. And in my case, I'm using Helm charts. So if I'm going into my simple node, Helm, then the values chart has been changed fully automatically for me to version number 3. And then the process goes on, right? So that means if I go back to my Keptn project here, and so the services view is where you can see the individual processes that you kick off. This is the root event. And on the right side, you see everything that Keptn orchestrates. And by now we can actually see Keptn made it into the quality gate retrieval. I got 88 points. It's a warning, but because I've specified warning is something that I potentially allow into production, but I have to kind of now manually say, do you really want this to go into production? Yes or no? Because remember, I had a deployment strategy defined, and you can specify what should automatically go in production and where do you need human interaction. So I can either do it here. I can also switch to the environment screen. Now in the environment screen, you see here build number 3 is deployed in dev, not a surprise. Build number 3 also made it into staging. This is the same app, and it's just pointing out the environment here. And then in prod, we still have build number 1 from an earlier deployment. But now I get to see, hey, you know what? There's a new build available. Build number 3, it got 88 points for the quality gates. And if you want, we just give it a go, and now it's getting the process continuous. Okay. All right. So this is quickly the overview and I'm obviously giving you the slides as well, so you can look at this. This is just the whole demo that I've just done in slides. The closed loop remediation is something that I will show you later. But once it is in production, Keptn can also orchestrate processes for auto remediation, because what if something that went well in pre-prod and everything, you got 100 points everywhere, but something fails, and let's say you get your Prometheus alerts and something is a problem, then Keptn can also orchestrate processes there. And the processes, again, are defined in Git, just as my shipyard file was defined. Cool. I brought a couple of examples earlier. I have more examples. Patrick from Amazon, they're using also GitLab for a CI. And then they're kicking off, let's say, delivery. That's also an option. I showed it to you through my CLI earlier, kicking off a process, but through the API, Keptn has a very rich API, so you can kick off any process like this as well. All right, so data-driven automation. So this was the first piece. I've shown you end-to-end, like the architecture, how it looks like, how it works, how it feels. Now I want to go into where a very particular component, which is SLOs that we're using at the center of Keptn. And this is why I also changed the title, if you've noticed, from just event-driven to also actually event and data-driven, because I think this is important. One thing we initially thought of that we wanted to solve is many organizations have delivery pipelines using great tools, but then there's often, and I have a background in performance and quality engineering, where you run your tests, but then there's this phase of manually analyzing all the results. And there's so many different results, functional results, performance results, you're monitoring results, there's so much data, and it's very hard to analyze all of this unless you're an expert and you know exactly what you're doing, or you've built your own tools that can do all of this. But many organizations struggle with this, and that's why it takes a long, long time to look at all the data and figure out good build or bad build. And this is why we thought, well, you know what, we are learning from Google's best practices. I guess I don't need to explain to you what SRE stands, site reliability engineering. A lot of cool best practices out there. What we've taken over is the concept of SLIs, SLOs. So for those that have never heard about it, SLIs, service level indicators, some metric, something that you can measure, like let's say the error rate of your login transactions. SLO is then what do you expect that metric to be in order for you to consider it successful, like the error rate has to be less than 2% over a longer period of time. And then SLAs are what happens if you are missing your SLOs, right? And maybe you have some legal obligations, you have some penalty, or you just simply lose users. This is kind of the terminology. Great videos out there from Google. The top line says it all. SLIs drive SLOs, which inform SLAs. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because we have seen a lot of organizations now really defining SLOs in production, using the monitoring and observability tools to monitor them, and also use it for alerting and reporting, right? So that means on a service level, on an application level, they define metrics, SLIs that are important for them. They define SLOs, their success criteria, and then they get the reporting on or alerting in case something is wrong. And that's great. What we are saying is, why not take this concept and shift it left and use the same terminology, the same approach, SLIs, metrics against thresholds, but do it with every single pipeline run, with every single bit, with every build, with every single commit. And this is what we're doing at the core of Keptn. Every time Keptn executes a process, makes a configuration change, a deployment, a test, and auto remediation, also in production, we always reevaluate the SLIs and SLOs by reaching out to the monitoring tools and pulling them back all the time. So how does this work? Very simple. Keptn has a core component, a service that is called the Lighthouse service that can reach out to different monitoring observability tools. Again, it's all event driven. So that means you can plug in any monitoring tool you like. We have support right now for Prometheus, for Dynatrace, also for Neoload, for Wavefront, and I think some others are in the work by the community. Basically how it works, if you want to use this capability, then you define SLIs. So what are the metrics out of your monitoring tool that you're interested in? You give it a logical name and then the tool specific query language. And then you specify SLOs. SLOs is really tool agnostic. That means you say, for this SLI, I have this pass and this warning criteria. You can work here with absolute and relative values. And you can also specify a total score. Because what basically happens, you can say, Keptn, I want you to evaluate, or Keptn will do this automatically also as part of delivery, but you can also use this feature standalone if you want to. So you say, Keptn, please evaluate. Then Keptn reaches out to your monitoring tools through an event. The monitoring tools return the data for the particular time frame that should be evaluated for the target environment. Keptn then looks at every metric, evaluates it against the criteria, gives points, and then sums up a total point based on the total number of SLIs. So we always then normalize it between 0 and 100%. So how many points did you have actually have achieved? And yeah, and this is then what you can easily use either standalone, just quality gates, or Keptn uses this capability, in anything basically Keptn does, in case Keptn orchestrates a longer process. There's different, ways how we visualize this. That depends also on the monitoring tool. For Dynatrace, I told you I work for Dynatrace, so we are using dashboards where you can define your SLOs as well. So you can do the SLI and SLO YAML route, but in Dynatrace we also provide a dashboard option. So you build a dashboard, you put all of your metrics on it, specify your thresholds, and then Keptn will automatically evaluate it. So let's actually have a closer look now at my quality gates here. So remember, services, build number 3, actually made it all the way into production now. That's great. And here are all the metrics. And I can actually hopefully open up this link here. I guess I haven't logged in a while. There you go. So just to show you where the data comes from. So the data comes in my case from my monitoring tool. I just put in all the metrics that are important, augmenting it with threshold information. I have static and absolute options, but basically Keptn is analyzing all the data that sits behind that dashboard. Now going back to Keptn, you can see here, this is the latest result of my quality gate. Every row here is an SLI, a metric. Every column represents a build, and then the individual colors for the individual validations, right? And then overall a total score. So that means here I can see the individual results where I had violations. I can also switch to the chart modus, which means I can look at every single metric as well if I want to historically. So we're just pulling the data in from your monitoring tool. Right, and this works for any type of environment here as well. This was my staging, but in the end, the same thing. So behind the scenes, as I said, let me go into my Git repository again. So in my Git repo, this is a little large. Let me go into prod. And for my simple node service, I have my SLO YAML, right? And here's the YAML version of like how, so that Keptn knows which metric, which SLI should be evaluated against which SLO. And then based on this, it calculates a total score. You can weight, you can give individual SLIs a different weight. So you can say this is more important than another. You can also mark individual SLIs as key, which means if this one fails, the whole evaluation fails. So if you, for instance, say, I don't want to have any error rate, then this should just override all the other results. So this is how you can specify it, either in YAML, or in my case, as I've shown you, we've just taken a step further and said, we let our users define dashboards, and then we extract this information from a dashboard. Cool thing is you can also use this capability completely standalone. I mean, in my sample, quality gates were used as part of the delivery process. Every time Keptn delivers and then runs tests, it reaches out to the tools, evaluates your SLIs, SLOs, comes back with a number, and then based on that, depending on your approval strategy, you can say, does this go into the next stage automatically, or do we need manual approval, or do we stop it? Cool. All right. Yeah, also one of the users, I had Christian earlier. I've shown his example. One of the first steps that they actually did when they improved and started automating and scaling delivery from GitLab, they used GitLab for, as you can see, deploy testing. And then for verify, they simply make a call to the Keptn quality gate as a standalone workflow that they automate. Right? So they just say, Keptn, you go off, you give me the results, and that's it. All right. Last part of my presentation, data-driven operations. So what this means is we talked about delivery, but there's actually much more, because once something is in operations, we also want to make sure that everything stays healthy in operations. And here, from a Keptn perspective, we talk about closed loop remediation that we've introduced with Keptn 0.7, which means Keptn can not only orchestrate delivery workflows, it can also be triggered by an alert from your monitoring tool, whether it's a Prometheus alert, or in this case, it's a Dynatrace problem. And what you can then do as a user of Keptn, you can specify a so-called remediation workflow. It looks like this on the left side. Again, in YAML, where you say, hey, if a particular problem comes in, I want this action to be executed and this action to be executed. And everything is event-driven. That means if Keptn retrieves a problem event from your monitoring tool, it looks into the Git repo and says, do we have a remediation workflow specified for that particular service or application where we have just been notified about a problem? If so, it then executes the first action. Now with execute an action, what it means, remember Keptn is event-driven. It sends an event, and the tool that handles that event, or that capability that can execute that action, will then execute that action. This can be calling an Ansible script. This could be, I don't know, calling a Jenkins pipeline, applying Terraform, whatever you want. So in this case, scaling up, what's very important, Keptn, after every action, re-evaluates your SLOs. We also talk about BLOs here, business level objectives, because in the production environment, you often look at business metrics like user experience index, like conversion rate, number of users on the system, failures, and so on. But the important thing is, after every action, it gets evaluated. If everything is good, then great. If not, the next action will be triggered as part of the workflow. And then again, re-evaluate it. If this brings the system back to a healthy state, great. If not, then the last step can still be escalate, which means you can, again, have Keptn in the workflow say, at the end, if nothing happened, you send a Slack message. Right? So this is great. This is what we think for production makes a lot of sense. But it's also scary if you try this the first time in production. This is why I'm really happy about the whole discipline around chaos engineering. We're working closely with Litmus and with Gremlin, because I think with this, we can actually test drive operations, or we can do test-driven operations, which means in a pre-prod environment, when you use these chaos engineering tools in combination with the load testing tools and then Keptn, then you can first validate, does your alerting work correctly? And if so, then you can build and refine and test your auto remediation workflows. And not only the workflow, but obviously all the tools that are also part of that, because in the end, nothing should go into production untested, which also includes your remediation and all the actions that are executed. And this is why I believe chaos engineering with Keptn, with auto remediation, is a great way to really also get this part tested, your auto remediation in production before it hits production. So let's wrap it up. Keptn is a data-driven delivery and operations automation magical thing, whatever you want to call it. The most important thing is you can pick your use case and you then bring your configuration, then you connect it to your tools. That means Keptn can, for instance, trigger a Jenkins pipeline for delivery, or it can be triggered by, let's say, Jenkins for just a quality gate evaluation. You can use it for just orchestrating tests and the quality gates. You can do it for end-to-end delivery. You can use it for remediation. And everything is event-driven, and we're basing everything on standards, so you can easily plug in your own capabilities, your own tools. And yeah, we hope that this is something that helps you in automating and also with this then scaling your delivery and everything else you have to do in your organization. Now, if you want to get started, check out tutorials.keptn.sh. We have put a couple of tutorials out on different platforms, different use cases. We're working very closely also with other folks in the CNCF. We have some tutorials, as you can see, Prometheus on OpenShift, Argo, Litmus. There's a couple of tutorials out there that you should check out. Now, if you have more questions, also hook us up on Slack. I know we have a discussion going on here now at the conference. If you want to follow up later with me personally, you find me on Twitter, you find me on LinkedIn. But please give us your feedback, and it would be great if you also start becoming a contributor, whether it's just with ideas or with actual code. We have regular developer community meetings every other week. We meet, and we're very happy to get you on board. With this, thank you so much. I say tschüss, as we say here in Austria. I'm in Austria. It's snowing out there, which is great, but I'm still happy to be in here. It's warm, but stay safe, stay healthy. Hope to see you at some point in real life and discuss how we can scale continuous delivery. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Andy, for this awesome presentation. I loved it. I think it's a great continuation of our discussion with Dave about capturing the production metrics and automating our decision-making process based on those. So while I'd like to remind everyone that they are welcome to ask their questions on the Discord channel, and while we're waiting for more questions, I wonder, how do you scale the SLI definitions? Because in their fairly recent article, Uber was talking about the challenges of defining metrics, because basically every team can use a slightly different definition of the metric, which could be a problem because it may be a little bit confusing. So basically, do you have any ideas on how you create like some sort of central repository where all the SLIs can be defined such that different teams can just reuse the same metric?
Yeah. So first of all, I hope you can hear me, because this is the first time I use this microphone setting. Yeah, so I think we still all have to learn as well on what the best practices are. The way we structured Keptn is that you can have SLIs specified on a project level, on a stage, and on a service level, which means if you're using Keptn in a setting like this, you can reuse the definition of an SLI for different services, for different stages with different thresholds. What we are also intending to do, and this was feedback we've received, we want to start thinking about templates, which means, or whatever you want to call it, right? You may say, hey, I have a Java-based application, I have a Node-based application, a Go-based application, and then I want to create a new Keptn project, and I want to automatically reference the SLIs that maybe some team in my organization has already defined for me as good SLIs for this particular platform. So that means we want to go into that stage. Now you also have seen Keptn is currently available in version 0.7.3 0.8 is coming out soon. There's still ways to go. I'm still sure we learn even more on how to make this better. But what we see is that people are really liking the idea. I mean, we didn't come up with it, right? I don't want to take credit for SLIs and SLOs, but they like it, and a lot of people are now trying to really figure out how to scale this big. You have seen Sumit, my example in the beginning. I think he has shown how he is scaling this. Everything is stored in Git, and everything is version controlled. You can easily inherit. Yeah, I think the future will also tell us, but we have already built a couple of things into Keptn to make this really scale.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess continuing this discussion, I'm just curious about your opinion on standardization process, because you mentioned that, for example, you were able to consume metrics from different providers, and you're also using cloud events. So cloud events, I believe, are more or less standardized, but there are many other aspects. Like, for example, I don't believe we have a standard for defining SLIs or SLOs and all those things. So do you have, since you probably have the most experience with declarative way of specifying all these things, I wonder if you had any ideas or plans to maybe start standardization process such that it can be reused across all the different metric providers or monitoring solutions.
Yeah, so you're right. There's no standard right now. We've been talking with, for instance, Spinnaker, who is using Cayenta, which initially came from Netflix. They also have kind of their way of how they evaluate and judge canaries. And I also know Micrometer has their implementation. I'm pretty sure if you look at the APM vendors like Datadog and New Relic, Instana, all these, they also have their ways, but there's no standard yet. So this is why we want to reach out to all of these folks. Now, we already have requests on our GitHub project for building integrations with a Datadog, with a New Relic, and with others. Hopefully they come, somebody will actually build this, and then we, together with an actual user, then say, okay, what's the best way to standardize this? And yeah, it's not done yet. I mean, we are part of CNCF. We are very active in CDF. We need to figure out who else to bring on board to also standardize SLIs and SLOs, because I agree with you. This is the next thing we need to do, and then it becomes much easier to plug in any type of data source.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in the industry, whenever we come up with some sort of standard, we start creating an ecosystem around it instead of just building separate tools. So that's why tools like Grafana, for example, or Prometheus are even possible, just because there is like some sort of definition for the metrics they can consume or the format they process. And this is what I guess drives the innovation and also makes sure that we actually have a very, very polished product instead of just a bunch of tools that are not very well integrated. Looks like we are a little bit behind the time, but fortunately we're going to have you at our panel discussion. So I really am looking forward to continue this discussion in a broader forum. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the panel.
See you later. Bye-bye.